Well, the U.S. is planning to position more troops around Iran. That much is confirmed. However, there does seem to be a dispute over how much. The Wall Street Journal reported earlier that the U.S. was planning to put some 14,000 troops around Iran, and we don't know exactly what around Iran means. That probably just means sprinkled, throughout the bases in the various countries around the Gulf, like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Kuwait, maybe even more to Afghanistan. The intention, of course, being to put more pressure on Iran and make them feel like they're more under threat from the U.S., and in doing so, hoping that they will capitulate to whatever the U.S.'s demands happen to be on that given day, and that they won't be so defiant. Now, it seems like we're entering another cycle of escalating Iran tensions. We've had quite a few of these in the past couple of years. And this time it seems to be completely one-sided in that it is the West escalating things, that the West is trying to put pressure on Iran and try to build them up as some great big threat. And with that said, the Pentagon is denying the Wall Street Journal report about the 14,000 troops. They just said it was wrong. However, the Undersecretary of Defense, I forget which one, because it's like being a vice president of a company. There's a bunch of them. The vice president of marketing, vice president of whatever. It's the same way with this undersecretary guy. So I don't remember exactly what he's the undersecretary of, but he basically denied the 14,000 number, but then said, well, we're talking about putting troops there. We don't know how many yet. So when the Pentagon said that the Wall Street Journal story was wrong, I guess they just meant that it was wrong that it was exactly 14,000 and that they were dead set on that. However, some people are saying, well, the Wall Street Journal report didn't really say that, but we don't need to get into that level of detail. Anyway, the important part is the Department of Defense has made it clear that they are going to, quote, increase their force posture, which is a nice way of saying they're going to build up troops around Iran. And I believe it was the Secretary of Navy also said that it's quite possible that a second aircraft carrier, because there's already one carrier in the Gulf region, that a second one could make its way there. Now, of course, none of this is enough to invade Iran or anything like that. It's just sort of to make them a little nervous. It's a step in that direction. It's mobilization. I mean, these are the sorts of actions that used to start wars back in the day. If you saw that, somebody was mobilizing troops along your border, that typically was a sign that you were about to be invaded. And so a lot of the times, militaries, if they were prepared, they would try and carry out a first strike. So this is a pretty dangerous game for the U.S. to be playing. They better hope that Iran doesn't take their threats too seriously, or else Iran might lash out in an attempt to try and take the Americans out before they can fully build up all their troops. And of course, just as they're provoking that sort of action, the U.S. is whining about how, oh my gosh, Iran might launch a sneak attack against us. They're so aggressive. When they're provoking it right here with these sorts of actions. They know they are. That's the intention. These guys aren't dumb. They've read history books. They've studied military history. They know exactly what they're doing. And of course, they're not only warning that Iran may attack these U.S. troops around their border that are sort of encircling them or are about to encircle them once they actually get put there. They're saying that, oh my gosh, Iran might attack Saudi Arabia's oil. And, there's nothing more important to the American people than Saudi oil. We have to defend that. So, if they attack Saudi oil like they did before, allegedly, even though they deny that, well, then, we can't let that go. We're America. If we don't fight for oil, what do we fight for? Now, of course, I'm being sarcastic. I never, even in the case of the Iraq War, I think it was dumb to say that was over oil and all that, but that's a story for another day. I do think, though, that this conflict with Iran does have a lot to do with protecting Saudi Arabian interests, even if it's not necessarily because we're trying to fight to get their oil or something like that. It actually is, quite the opposite, but I'll get to that later. So what's the broader context of this troop buildup? Basically, what's going on right now is you have a lot of the Western countries, not just the U.S., talking about what a threat Iran is. The UK has never liked Iran. Of course, because of the whole BP thing, the 1953 coup. There's always been a grudge between the UK and Iran. And so a lot of the Western countries right now are whining about how Iran is building nuclear-capable missiles, and you're not allowed to do that. Even though they don't have nukes, they're saying, well, here's what you're not allowed to do is build missiles that can even carry a nuclear warhead. You can't do that. And again, how do you define that? Apparently they're saying there's some kind of UN treaty about this. I don't know too much about that, but I would imagine that you can retrofit a lot of different missiles to carry a nuclear warhead. I don't think that there's a set, like 5 patterns of missiles that can be nuclear capable. You probably can, try and build just maybe a new type of missile. Or you could, even if they're not building missiles that are nuclear capable, they can say, because they might be able to carry a nuclear warhead, oh well, you're in violation of the treaty. So it doesn't seem like it would be such a fine line to me. It's not like it's a specific ban on like a bore diameter of a gun or something like that. In fact, to use sort of a gun analogy, you can think of a missile as sort of a cartridge case, and the warhead as the bullet. So in that case, if, let's say, Iran uses, 9mm ammunition in their handguns, you can accuse them of producing hollow point capable cartridge cases, even though hollow points are banned by the Geneva Convention, and that's because a cartridge case can, you can load a lead, a round nose bullet or a hollow point in the same cartridge case, and I would think that missiles are to some extent similar. Now, all this tough talk and pressure is apparently leading up to some negotiations coming out, that Iran is going to engage in with the West over trying to lower sanctions and deal with the whole nuclear program fiasco and all that. However, what I think is interesting that not a lot of people really address is, given that Iran's nuclear program is clearly not much of a threat militarily, there are differences in uranium enrichment levels that you would have to reach in order to make enriched uranium that you can actually use in a bomb, and that there's a pretty big difference between the kind of uranium enrichment program that's going on in Iran and the kind that you would need to build a bomb. Why then is the West so concerned? Why does the West think that Iran is about to build a nuclear bomb or something when they are willing to allow these inspectors to come in to make sure that they're not making the kind of enriched uranium that you would need for a bomb? What are they so afraid of? Well, the only thing that makes sense is that they're trying to protect Saudi oil interests. That's all I can figure out at this point, because logically, there's no real reason to be afraid of Iran's nuclear program when they allow this many restrictions to be placed on them. It seems that the real threat of the Iran nuclear program is that if Iran has a nuclear program, well, then they won't need to use as much of their oil that they get out of the ground domestically for electricity generation and power generation. The reason why Iran wants nukes is because nuclear energy is much more efficient than oil. And right now, and natural gas and all that, right now Iran generates their power from fossil fuels that they mine out of the ground. And if they were able to use nuclear energy, which is more efficient, they could then export more oil. And they could, then bring down the global price of oil. There would be less oil in demand in Iran, and then so they would be able to export more and lower the price, which is, an unabashed net benefit for everyone involved, unless you're an oil-producing state like Saudi Arabia, who doesn't want Iran to be able to influence the price of oil that much. It's quite funny. Iran right now is energy independent. They get all their energy from their pretty much all of it, from their domestic oil supply, and then they export some of that. But Iran wants to give that up because, they're basically asking for free trade. That's kind of what Iran is doing here. They're saying, well, we have a comparative, it's a comparative advantage argument, basically. I won't get into it, but if Iran can produce energy more cheaply using nuclear and then export more oil, well, then of course they'd want to do that. Of course everyone would want to do that, because then that means more oil on the global market, cheaper oil for all of us. The only people who don't benefit are the other oil-producing states, i.e. the Sunni Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, because they want less oil on the global market so that they can get a better price for it. But even still, they have OPEC, which Iran is a part of. So I don't quite understand, even in this context, even though this is the thing that makes the most sense to me, why they're that afraid of Iran being able to export their oil. Unless they're afraid that Iran might leave OPEC and go rogue. Because right now, Iran doesn't really have the ability to produce so much to hurt the Saudis in terms of pushing the price down and kind of just dumping oil out onto the global market to try and bankrupt everyone else, which kind of is what Saudi has done to the Russians in recent years. The Saudis have pumped more oil than they otherwise would have on behalf of the United States to try and get the price of oil to a point to where it's not that profitable for the Russians to sell their oil. So maybe the Saudis are conscious of this, and they know that Iran is an enemy of theirs, and that they might do that in the future at some point. They might pull out of OPEC in order to do that, so that they could hurt the Saudis. So that really is all I think this whole Iran nuclear situation can be about, because, like I said, if Iran were trying to build a bomb, it'd be really obvious if there were inspectors on the ground, because you have to do really specific. You have to enrich the uranium to a specific level in order to build a bomb. They're not doing that. So that's completely off the table. All this stuff about missiles and about, they're going to launch a sneak attack on us, it's all red herrings, and it all just seems to be targeted at the civilian nuclear program. So, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So, I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.